Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. It is fantastic to have you here because today is part 2 of me building a steel-framed hardtail mountain bike with way too little knowledge to actually be able to pull this off, but I'm gonna be trying nonetheless. A bike is incredibly complex, there's a ton of important geometry that goes into it, and I'm also not a very good TIG welder, but I'm gonna be showcasing my journey of going from bird pooper extraordinaire to hopefully having a mountain bike that doesn't make me fall off a mountain. Thank you for joining me. Today's sponsor is NordVPN, virtual private network service giving you a taste of anonymity and freedom while you're browsing the web. And you can get 70% of a 3-year plan when you go to nordvpn.com/forge, and you'll get an extra month for free using code FORGE at checkout. Right, at the end of the last episode, you saw the design that I came up with. This is it. So I want to find a way to take our drawing and then take this welding cart. It's a Rhino cart, and it was sent to us, and it is just fantastic. It's flat, it's got holes in it, and I want to use this as a way for building a jig to weld this all together. Bike builders like their jigs. This is from a Cobra Frames video on YouTube. He's got a great bike building channel, which has been a good resource for this. And you see, this is a jig with moving parts, tilting parts, measurements, and angles, so that a bike builder that's making a custom frame can take the design they make and then just move the parts of the jig around and move the angles to mean that when they put the tubes in place, they're ready to go. But we don't have one of those jigs, but we've got an incredible resource that is this table, and I want to make the most of it. This bike is going to be so much more about proper layout and proper angles than it is going to be about the welding. And if I think the welding is going to be challenging, which I know it is, the layout is going to be the one that really flexes the old brain muscle. I want to run you through some terminology because I had to learn a lot to even be able to understand any of this stuff. This is a bicycle. It's slightly different. This is a cyclocross bike, but the terminology is very much the same. Now, of course, you know, you apply pressure to the pedal to move the chain to turn the wheel. But to be able to spin the pedals, you need to have bearings, and those bearings are contained within the bottom bracket. On this particular bike, there's a bearing here and a bearing here. And that's a very crucial reference point in a bicycle, because where the bottom bracket is in relation to your saddle is going to affect how you're pedaling, how you're able to put power to the pedal. It's going to affect the feel of the bike, and it's one of the most important reference marks for every other measurement. Seat tube, top tube, down tube, and here at the front of the bike, much like at the front of a human being, is the head tube. You don't have a tube in a human being, but you do have a head. And that's why it's much like the front of the human being. This head tube is where your steering happens. Inside here are 2 bearings in a head set, and they allow the tube that you steer with that connects to the fork, which is a steerer tube, to allow you to steer. And the angle of this is going to affect the feeling of the bike when you're steering and the feeling of the bike as you go over obstacles. This has a rather steep head tube angle compared to a mountain bike. We're going for a very slack one of 64.5 degrees. You see the difference. Cyclocross bike, mountain bike. And then behind the bottom bracket, you have 2 chain stays here and then on the other side, to which our axle is bolted. And then you have a seat stay, which is the tube that connects to the seat tube. You remember the bottom bracket, where you'll see it has the cranks on it, and you spin it in there, and this is what our bottom bracket looks like. It has threads on the inside. That is gonna go onto the table and be one of our first reference marks. There we go. that is tooling piece number 1 ready to go. This lifts our bottom bracket up so that the center line is 100 millimeters off of the table, about 4 inches. Which means that so long as I make this whole thing so the center of every tube is 100 millimeters off the table, we're gonna be headed in the right direction towards having a straight frame that isn't warped and twisted. So this is very exciting. Alright, so here is the head tube holding component of our jig. Look at that, a little bit of aluminium, machined, only snapped 1 tap. This is going to be how we dictate the angle of the head tube. It's time to work on the bottom piece that this is going to screw into, and we need to put some angles on it. So as you can see, our head angle jig is complete. It is a piece of aluminium, and then we have this. We have our marks for the different angles. I want to let you know a little trick that I used for getting these holes in the right place so that the angles work. Joe Pizinski has an incredible machining channel on YouTube that you should check out. And he made a video once on how to get precise angles on a mill by using trigonometry and your DRO to plot hole centers to then be able to put dowel pins in and then cut the angle, use that as a parallel. You see, here's the thing, I'm not very good at maths, so I wanted to avoid the trigonometry. So I went into Adobe Illustrator and I plotted out a jig. I then used the line segment tool to then make a line that was the angle we wanted. Say we want a 65-degree head angle, that's going to be a 205-degree angle here, because it's 270 minus 65 degrees. And there we go. Doing that and working from a hole center, I was able to make the 4 angles we wanted. And then when I take the rectangle tool, I'm able to draw a rectangle out to a particular point, the intersection between the line that we made and a circle that I drew to. I then get XY coordinates for where that is relative to our center. So long as we work from the center and everything stays square, I can then get the XY coordinates for all of these without needing to do any trigonometry, just simply by drawing boxes and typing in angles. And I'm really, really pleased to have stumbled across this way of doing it, inspired by Joe Pizinski's method of doing it. This is the faster and simpler way, and it's also the way that I was able to get my brain to properly comprehend what was going on. Using 4 bits of paper, another block of aluminium, I was able to get the center line of our head tube set up, and then provided I keep it square this way, according to this edge, and this edge, that's going to be the right angle. So look at that, we now have 2 parts of our bike frame, both stood up with the center line of 100 millimeters, and I think the next step is for us to get some of these tubes up off the table. Alright, so check these out. These are tube blocks. They are square pieces of aluminium. They have 2 screws in them, which means they open up and then can clamp around the tubing. It's designed really so that you can clamp the tubing without crushing it, because if you just put this in a V-block or worse between flat jaws, you would crush this thin wall tubing. We have ourselves some spacers, which means that to within about 5/100ths to 1/10th of a millimeter, we are square and level and true, which is about as true as this table could even allow. because it's a pretty flat table, but it's not a surface plate. And so I am just thrilled. Using the lathe helped me out so much. I started to get this new technique dialed for how I can go from millimeters to inches really fast, and how I can use the Imperial Dials on the lathe to do it. That's been really fun. So I'm actually gonna show you that little technique, because I wish I'd come across this technique sooner. Right, say I've either got a drawing that has this measurement, or I have a part that has it. I'm gonna find the measurement I'm looking for, 24.1. Next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to 0 it, and then since I'm working on an Imperial lathe, I'm gonna set it to inches. Turn the lathe on, we'll start turning. So then on my last cut, I loosen up this dial, so this is free. I come in, turning this dial clockwise, without turning the screw, really gentle. I find a 0, and I lock the dial. So now I know my next cut, my last cut, is gonna be at 0. We take the cut, we come back across, and now take my calipers, and I see we are 150 thousandths of an inch proud. Since this dial measures diameter, not the radius, we know that we need to go to about 150 on the dial to take that off the diameter. Instead, I'm gonna go to a little less, 124. Then I'll go to 140 before I do my next measurement. Without moving the dial, I'll take another measurement, and I see we're about 15.5 thousandths proud. So I'm gonna go 13. By inching it in, we are half a thou away. Easy peasy. Obviously, to all you pro machinists out there, this probably isn't very useful to hear, because frankly, you know, the level of accuracy I'm trying to achieve is nothing compared to your A-bomb 79s of the world, and I'm sure the thousands of you guys that are watching that have a whole lot more machining experience than I do. But if I can empathize with somebody that's in my position, not a huge amount of skill, but a desire to get some stuff done with reasonable accuracy in a somewhat timely manner, you are like me, this tip could be helpful and could save you some time at the lathe. Now, despite all that enthusiasm and confidence, it has suddenly dawned on me that at this stage, I have no idea what the next step is. Oh boy. So I think the next step is just cutting steel and starting to put it together. But I'm still incredibly nervous about my measurements and bike fit. How, you know, the rider interacts with the bike is very important. It's, you know, down to a science. And I'm no scientist and definitely no bike fitter. But I feel pretty good about my position on the cyclocross bike. I'm now also going to cross-reference to this. Okay, after all, I'm going to reduce the reach a little bit. So you'll see the new one is a little extra squished, so that should fit better. The question now is, are we able to take this drawing and work out what length our tubes are and where they need to be? Alrighty folks, I've been organizing things on the table, and I think that tomorrow we're just gonna have to get stuck in and start cutting some tubing. This is scary. What I love are projects that I'm terrified about working on, because I really feel like they stretch my brain, they stretch my skills, they get me to think and force myself to be creative, and I love that. So I hope you folks too are setting yourself some challenges. We're gonna have some fun things coming up to hopefully help inspire you to challenge yourself in the workshop soon. Today's sponsor, however, has been NordVPN. NordVPN is a virtual private network service. This means they have over 5,000 servers all around the world in 60 plus countries. They're all designed to give you flexibility and anonymity and safety while you're browsing the web. You get flexibility because in their handy dandy iOS, Android, Mac and PC apps, you're very easily able to switch the country from which the websites you're browsing think you're browsing from. So say there's a particular show that you wanted to stream that's only available in France, we were able to do it just like that. Oh, there's one in the UK? Easy peasy lemon squeezy, we've gone ahead and connected to the United Kingdom. Then on top of the flexibility, you sprinkle in some anonymity because the connection between you and Nord's servers back and forth is encrypted with their military grade encryption, giving you also extra safety, meaning that you're less likely to have data compromised. With Nord, you can have up to 6 connections simultaneously, which means one account is good for you and all of the family, and it's risk-free because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you can get started today by going to nordvpn.com/forge, where you're going to be getting 70% of a 3-year plan, and if you use code FORGE at checkout, you'll get an extra month for free. Thank you, Nord, for sponsoring this. Thank you guys for supporting our sponsors and watching this episode. See you very soon. Bye-bye.